So, in essence, to bring it up to speed, is this about a letter that Nectar sent you?
Yes.
About the future scheme?
About the future scheme, but I would say overall, ongoing employment, non-traditional career paths, I think they're all intermingled.
So, would you rather sort of address those points, ask the questions for us?
I'm happy to do it however we want to do it.
Okay.
In fact, I know we're going to cover it, so it's whatever makes sense to you.
You have
So-
enough? Okay. So, let's just get straight to it.
Okay?
So, question number 1 on ongoing employment comes from this table.
So given that researchers are more productive the longer they're at a university, which you had mentioned in your blog recently, thus they benefit the university and addresses the initiative of building the culture of excellence at ANU, what specific steps have been taken in the past 12 months and will be taken in the next 12 months to provide opportunities for ongoing and continuing employment? Thank you.
Okay, good. So this comes down to, I think, this first slide, which I'm going to call the academic life cycle of an ANU academic. So, and working on both, okay? So this is not how things work right now, but how I think things need to be thought about more broadly. When you look at the university, and let's just come back to the foundations. A university is made up of a whole bunch of people working in a variety of roles, but tradition has pretty much said that the only interesting thing is this one. Now that's wrong, but like it or not, that's the sort of pervading view within this university. Less so at other universities in other countries. So if you go to Stanford or MIT, which I think are pretty good places to aspire to in some ways, they would not see that tenured position as being the only marker of success. But I would say within the academic community of this university, that is seen as a primary marker of success. There are some exceptions to that rule. For example, in the area of strategic studies and in political science and even economics, I would say there's more flexibility around that. The challenge we have is that when we make a decision on giving someone a continuing position in a university, that is typically it's a greater than a 10-year, and can be up to a 40, 45-year decision. So it has a huge ramification for the university. But it's also a very important part of what a university is, because that is the notion of academic freedom comes with that notion of tenure. So it needs to be preserved at some level. Over the last 15, 20 years, and I would say this is since we've entered the ARC and NHMRC systems, the university has systematically not had more people going to continuing. What we have done is we have hired many people into here, and then we have recycled these positions, and people have become ECRs, MCRs, and I would even say quite late-term researchers, with this notion of a continuing position amorphously in the future. And if I can be brutally honest, we've made 10 dangles to each position available. And that is where we find ourselves today. So we have many, many people in non-continuing roles who aspire to be in continuing roles, then there's any opportunity and funding to do so. Okay. So, what I am keen to do is to provide a structure going forward that I think is more sensible for everyone, provides much clearer signals, provides a wealth of opportunities, a wider range of opportunities. I don't want to say a wealth because we're constrained by funding still. And I think the challenge, and for this group especially, is there's a transition between the system we have now and one that I think is sustainable and reasonable. And that transition is the hard part. But let's just talk through the system that I guess I would like to see. So what I've put up in this document I can share with you is sort of a set of people within the university external groups, business and other external academic bits, and I put arrows, the size of the arrows being sort of the relative flux, so the number of people going on those paths. Now those arrow fluxes are a little different than what we do now, but as a university that I think wants to be world-class, we want to bring in PhDs from a range of places, not just, people directly out of ANU. We want to attract a PhD cohort from around the world with very diverse experiences, possibly within government, within industry, and directly out of university, a range. And that PhD, right now, under current numbers, you have to expect that for every PhD we train, for probably every 20 PhDs we train, there is a continuing position at ANU, and probably you can multiply that by 2 or 3 in terms of the world, because we provide more opportunities than the average institution in the world for our PhD students. But it's still, the vast majority of people doing PhDs are not going to end up in a tenured position. The pyramid scheme that the people who trained you were part of has ended. That is, we're not going to exponentially grow any further. It's just the way things are. I'm not saying it's fair, it's probably not, but it is the reality we live in. But I would argue that if you're going to be an interesting university right now, there's so much happening outside the university that is also interesting, that we do need fluidity between external organizations and this organization that are not just universities. And so we have to have a career structure that allows for that and even encourages it and rewards it and celebrates it. And I would say we don't have that yet. We're beginning to put it in, but it's a cultural change that's been embedded since 1946 here, and since probably about 1946 everywhere. It's a post-World War II phenomenon that we might do this. And so most ANU PhDs, I would expect to go to other academic institutions, to other organizations, because that's just the numbers game of how many people we're training, everyone else is training, and where the opportunities are in jobs. It is not impossible to advance and become an ECR at ANU from an ANU PhD, but you have to ask yourself in general for an institution whether or not you want that to be the primary path. And I would say you don't. You want an institution that is able to think outside and bring in information from around the place. So it's not something that you want to say can't happen or you should even discriminate against, but it's just not based on the numbers where I would expect activity to occur, because I expect these ECRs to be very much an international or national, depending on the subject, area of search. So we're going to be looking, for the best people. When people are here, as an early career researcher, I don't want people used as cannon fodder. There's certain disciplines where, I'm sorry, people are used as cannon fodder. They are used in place of a technical assistant. They don't have any real, substantive research, creativity, and things. It rather is a different role, and we need to make that very clear. And there's nothing wrong about being essentially a research assistant. That is a very important role and is a very important part of a team. And indeed, in the modern era, it may well be that we need people with PhDs to do that type of work. It's very sophisticated. But we need to be very clear on what our expectations are, and we don't do what we do right now, and we interchange job descriptions for people who are essentially research, working to someone else's agenda versus doing their own agenda. Okay, so I want very clear expectations and roles. From that pool is, in academic terms, meant to be a pool where I think this university needs to provide a great environment, whether or not you're planning to go in to try to get a continuing position or not, or whether or not it's ambiguous to you. And I think we need to look at that as sort of a standard level of what ANU commits to you when we bring you into this thing. And I expect that to be a really good level, and probably more than what most of you are used to right now. Where we do give you freedom, where we do give you some resources, where you have expectations to be able to go out and create an academic career if that's what you want out of that position, but noting we can't have hundreds and thousands of those positions. It's just the finances aren't there. But there's no promise going again into what I would call a tenure track position. You may advance that way, but again, these positions will typically be sourced from around the world. But rather than waiting until people are well into being mid-career and even late career to become continuing, which is what I'm afraid we do right now, I am arguing that we need to make decisions of getting people certainty in their lives early on in their careers in the academic stream, so that we can provide some certainty and, quite frankly, better support. So we take, people give them very clear signaling, and then we support them. We give them the resources they need, rather than having more people than we have money and support for, and we sort of starve everyone equally, and quite frankly give 5 people hopes for one position. I just think, we get away with it right now, but I think in the long term we're going to end up with a very disenfranchised group of people who do not want to become academics, and we lose our talent to people who want to go out and do something else. And so I just don't think it's a sustainable bit. Now, people here can go overseas, they can go into industry, there's a whole range of people, and it used to be that once you were here, you had probably a 90% chance of ending up in an academic stream. That is, again, what your supervisors would have experienced. And they'll probably have expectations that it's the same environment that they had for you. It's not. Right now, probably only 30 or 40% of people are moving into permanent academic positions from here, as opposed to 80 or 90%. All right? Again, is a permanent academic position the be-all and end-all? And I would argue it isn't. If I can tell you my own personal reflection, is the happiest time I've had in my academic life was here and here. Okay? Once you get up into here, your life starts looking like many other jobs. And I know that's maybe not what it's seen to you, but ask people, especially recent people who've been within 5 years of converting. I think you'll find that it's not a particularly, they're good jobs, they're interesting, but it's not like it's a standout career compared to other aspects. You have a lot of responsibility, and the ability to just have pure freedom is gone. It doesn't exist in the way it did 30 or 40 years ago. Once you're into what I would call a tenure track, why do I want to have a tenure track? Because I want to be able to make decisions early and resource people early on. And it's essentially a probation period, an extended probation period, so that people have the opportunity, and I would say we give them support and we expect people to succeed. We're expecting success. Some people will decide that's not what it is for them. Lives are complicated, but you would expect, 80% plus then once you're here to move on to become continuing faculty, because we've basically thrown the kitchen sink to make sure that people get going in their careers. But there are other careers that are going to be happening, and what I'm calling this ANU fixed term position. Now, we have a lot of people in those roles right now, fixed term, but they're not seen as being up here. They're sort of seen as being down here. And I want to say that I actually think those are really important roles. I think they're really interesting roles. And if, as I said, if you go into our strategic studies people, we have major level people coming in from government, going in there for 3 or 4 years and then going back out. That's just part of what happens. It just doesn't happen in the rest of the university in the same way. And so we need to realize that that's going to be a very important part of the ecosystem going forward. And I think we need to give them suitable titles and prestige, and include them in the operations of the university in a great way, but make sure and probably load people up with extra salary because they don't have the continuing position of certainty, and that's sort of the trade-off that you make. But these need to be seen as very important positions going forward. And then finally, if you can get people to retire, they'll become emeritus. That turns out to be harder than you think, even when people get salary rises when they retire. If I can give you any advice, convince people that they should become that being an emeritus is a great time of your life. It's a great thing. And we have some amazing people here who are emeritus. You don't even know are emeritus because we don't discriminate. The only difference is we've invested 17% of their salary for their entire lives in the superannuation system, and I'd like people to use that money before dying. And those are where the positions you guys all want are going to come from. Right? People don't retire, there aren't going to be any extra positions. So it's a little different system than we're used to. I think it's meant to be a more honest system, but it's also meant to give more certainty to people. But it also means that I'm not prepared to tell 5 of you incorrectly, when you're mid-career, oh, just keep waiting, that tenure job will come. I'm not prepared to make that law anymore because I don't think I'm just not prepared to do it. I don't think it's honest. All right. So that's the basic philosophy in terms of ongoing employment. So if you think about this, well, you can put where you are in this bit and you can see what I think are your mapped out opportunities, okay? And this will be scary to some of you because you've been told, no, just wait and I'm going to get one of these. Well, you might. But what I'm telling you is that's not your only option. You've got a lot of other options that are good and interesting. And my own staff and students who have taken other options are really happy, and they keep coming back and we're working with them. It's actually quite fun. They're happy. We're all happy. So don't buy into it that this is the only way forward. It's not. And the university, if it's going to be great, has got to have a whole range of people excited about being here on a variety of different ways forward. Okay? But when you are here, the thing that we do need to change is to make sure that we support you and give you very clear signals of what expectations are, rather than, I would say, limp you along and give you unclear signals, which is what I fear we do now. So what have we done over the last year to try to support some of these things? Well, universities are like big aircraft carriers, and if you want to turn them, it takes time. So I have been messaging essentially this, and I will message again to all the heads of department, the basic framework that I see that we need to adopt if we want to go forward in a sensible, reasonable way. I'm telling people I want people's support. If we do bring people here, I want them to be equipped to succeed. And I want to have very clear career structures that are not ambiguous going forward. I am incentivizing very strongly these positions so that when we hire people in those positions, we support them well. I am going to start incentivizing this area in terms of putting expectations and probably some resources in so that there's sort of a, when we hire ECRs, we make sure that they get the travel support and types of things that you need when you're an ECR, rather than just saying, here's an office, good luck. We're reinventing, so we're in the middle of looking at what an ANU PhD really is going to look like. And so there's a consultative process that is starting right now and hopefully will involve you all, and because you have probably a better idea than any other stakeholder in the university of what a PhD needs to be. The PhD people are still trying to figure it out, and I'm afraid the professors of the university are wedded to the past, and they will really find it difficult, I think, to provide the insights. With respect to other initiatives of funding things, you will see that, as I said, the Futures program is really meant to drive people into those tenure track and continuing positions to support them. We have this new thing called entrepreneurial hires, and I'm looking at extending it to probably something that I'm thinking about calling enterprise fellows, so that we bring people into positions, and we say these are really important positions. They're not tenured in the traditional sense, but they're important positions, and we expect people to have a variety of experiences and probably have expectations of going back out into industry and government. And finally, we have some broader things like global challenges. And global challenges have specifically been told that I don't want to run up here. I want to run bottom up. I want you guys to have the ideas behind them. And there's going to be substantive funding there. And it's not a bunch of silverbacks out there, controlling things. It's really meant to be something that brings the university across, and you guys know how to move across the university far better than the older, the senior professors. And then finally, the other form of funding that exists are, there are funds from Margaret, not a lot, because the university just doesn't have that much money, that can flow into all of these categories of academics for specific projects, but they're very targeted. And finally, your school directors have a responsibility which is not being fulfilled. And that is, school after school has went through and hired more people than the funds of the school or the college can support. And that has to stop. That is, we've always said, oh, we'll just hire another person. And sorry, yeah, we've got 95% of your salary, blah, blah, blah. And that is a very bad way to provide a good environment for all of you to work in. And so we have to get the deans and directors to not spend all of their money on recurrent funds, on recurrent salaries. There needs to be flexibility, there needs to be money there to support the work of the people who are there. Now, there are a few parts of the university that have huge teaching loads, and obviously they do need the staff to teach, but that is like 2 out of 50 budget units at this university. The other people, essentially every single one of them, the deans and directors have not, in my opinion, saved enough of their funds and allocated them in a way that's responsible. They've instead hired more people. Those are, as I said, it may not be comforting to you, but I just don't think it is fair to have this cohort underfunded and underpromised to. I think we have to be much clearer. So those are sort of the basic strategies there. All right. So that was a long bit. That was the part that I want. I'll be more sharp in the rest of my answer, but that's the basic ideas, and there may want to be some response to that because I think it'll be up forefront in everyone's mind.
Do you have a desired and a realistic timeline for this change of culture that you'd like to see?
Well, I would, we're starting it now, and you would start seeing, I think, quite, you should start seeing major inroads even this year, but, you're not going to get the complete change probably for 5 years because things are embedded and people resist in all sorts of interesting ways. And that's fine. It's going to have to be a negotiation at the school level because the school directors have autonomy. And the only way this is going to happen is by incentives, but I can't just come down and say, thou shalt do this. It doesn't work in this university. It just won't work. But incentivizing it is, I think, the right way.
Okay, so I think that this has sort of changed the order in the way that we want to see things, and rather than following that order, we'll follow what you spoke and go directly to deeper and more sharp to some topics. So, I'll start on this side and I'll circle back that way.
Thank you, and I do, this is very heartening for me, and I want to congratulate you on the steer you're taking this direction, this university. And
Congratulate when I actually make it happen.
Yeah, well, okay, but I think it's very, personally, I think it's very encouraging. But our table was discussing non-traditional career paths, and you've already outlined the value of that, so I won't go into that. But I'm interested, or we're interested in hearing more about what steps the university is taking or could take to embrace these career paths, and particularly to recognise other forms of expertise and knowledge outside of the publication or the traditional academic thing in those tenure track and continuing pathways.
Absolutely. So this is sort of core of one of the big pieces of work that we're trying to do this year, which is to have every part of the university down to the school level redefine or really look at what does it mean to be excellent. And don't tell me 4 Nature papers. Okay, 4 Nature, it's not bad. Nature papers, well, actually, we can argue whether or not Nature papers are good or bad. People will get me going on that in a normal bit. But my point being is publication, traditional method, remains something that universities do. But I would say it is not the only thing. And so what I want people to think about is there's a suite of things that look excellent. And I would say that includes, obviously, traditional research bits. There is teaching really well, being really collegial, and helping make things happen across the university. And there's having impact in other ways that's hard for me to list, but which I think in a discipline-specific way might, kind of lends itself. If you're an economist and you're working across to help develop policy within the federal government, that's a good thing and should be rewarded and thought about as a great thing. So getting those statements out so that you, when you're looking at your promotion or your application, you can say, these are the suite of things I do that make me excellent. And it might be, you're an all-rounder and you do a little bit of each very, very well. If you do each okay, that probably isn't excellent. So that's a little trap that you all need to be careful, is we do, universities and anywhere else in life tend to like people who are pretty close to excellent in one of those areas rather than being completely even in all of them. And so that is going to be the foundation of the promotion and hiring practices of this university, and that is happening. That is Marnie Hughes Warrington, one of her top things for this year is to get, but it has to happen at the school level, and you need to be part of those conversations at your school level and say, what does excellence really look like? Now, I need to warn you that because if you want to get a tenured position, the world standard, I'm probably not going to be able to change this, is that, like it or not, and I'm not saying this is the right or wrong, I'm saying it's the way it is that in universities, they expect you to excellent bar. Okay? So early in your career, achieving research excellence in some way, shape, or form seems to underpin legitimacy, no matter what you do in the future of your career. And if I go to a place like Stanford and I meet them, they all have this research, this imprimatur, usually pretty early in the career, but not exclusively. So what does that mean for you? Well, again, research is, in the future, not sufficient. So don't think that all I have to do is work 90 hours a week and pump out a bunch of papers. The only thing I care about is whether or not you are doing really interesting work. And I don't care if you do 4 papers or 1, if one of those papers is interesting. All right? And so the notion that we become obsessed with, where we measure your H-index or things like that, is rapidly going to change, okay? I know it's here now, but it's not going to be here 5 years from now. Trust me on this. What I look for now, and I'm usually ahead of the game, is I just say, has this person in research done something that is what I would describe as truly inspirational, of however, and I'm very loose in what I describe it. Okay? It has to be something that is good. 5 mediocre papers is not the way to succeed in research anymore. And so hopefully that will give you some inspiration to balance your work-life load, because it is very hard to be creative when you're working 80 hours a week. You need to have time to think. And I actually think pretty well out playing with my kids and things. It's not a bad time to do that. So think about quality. Think about creativity rather than just pure fire hose, okay? Now, you can't be zero output. You do need to have output. But along that, you know, being collegial, being seen as a good teacher, these are all things that are going to support your application in the future, much more so than in the future. Okay? But it underpins how we promote, how we hire, and the criteria. And so those are being set in stone at the school level now. And we have a lot of dinosaurs in this university who struggle. And it's not going to be a perfect, seamless bit. But that is how we're doing it. And so you may not realize it, but at level D and E, if your teaching is not up scratch, you do not get promoted anymore. And we have had some rather upset dinosaurs not be promoted, and Marnie can tell you the story. She's back here somewhere. But that is real, and she has just added, as she will tell you, collegiality as a new marker for whether or not you get promoted in this university. So that's how we're trying to do it.
Okay, so our next question is related to people that are already coming in and out of campus.
Yep.
And you know, they might be, rather in the long term, perhaps it's too long of a term for them to, I'll let them express themselves.
Thank you. So we were talking about the casuals to sessional academics and the casuals on short-term contracts. So I'm just wondering where they fit in on your diagram. And our specific question is, how can the university enable these people to fully utilize their existing industry and other expertise, and to integrate them into the broader university life so that they have equitable access to university services?
All right, so you know, my basic approach, you know, ANU has the lowest casualization rates in the sector, and I'm not intending to change that. My view is you use casualization largely as a matter of convenience for both sides. That's when you want to use it. It's not something that I'm particularly keen on institutionalizing. So I'll give you an example where I don't think casualization is a problem. It is the only reasonable means we have for example, employing PhD students to become, for example, RAs or TAs and things. And I would like to do it in a different way, but I'm not legally, I think, able to do that sensibly. It is a place there, I think, of mutual convenience. But my goal is to try to set up structures that if you have a desire as someone, for example, if you're teaching casually, I have to ask myself, why would I not actually make you a fixed term person of some length specializing in teaching? So if I can do that, immediately that puts you into a category where you get all the support things that you want. So my fundamental way is to try to limit it as much as possible, because the number of positions on this campus where we literally just need you for a semester, there are a few of those, but I want to minimize those as much as I can. And I'm open to think about if there are specific things that people on those casualized contracts are missing out on. I am open to thinking about what those things are, and I should, you know, we should just know about them. And feel free to email me. This group would be particularly good at emailing me that if there are things we're missing.
I heard library card at this once.
Say that again?
I heard library card in the discussion of this
okay, fair enough. Marty, we can, presumably library cards should not be something that we decide to be really hard-nosed on with casual people who aren't casualized workers.
People don't have a library card at all. Right.
Yeah, as I said, my intent to be, that's just a ridiculous restriction.
So I guess the takeaway here is that those people should feel empowered to directly contact whoever is necessary.
Well, I think you're better if you work in a voice. So you know, if you have the ability to funnel your comments through Nectar and write me,
yep.
it will get attention.
Okay.
And let me just tell you, there's, you know, if there are strong financial issues, then clearly there's a problem. You are loaded up with extra money to compensate if you are casual. But for most views, my view is casuals should be, for a university, used for mutual benefit, not just for the university's benefit. And I don't want to have a lot of people on casualized positions. It's just not where I want to be. It's not strategic because you're going to pick up and leave because it's a bad position.
Okay, so related to that, there's also strategic access to resources to early career academics.
Yes. So,
She got there.
yes, go ahead.
So you mentioned a few times about the importance of resourcing and supporting people who are already at the ANU.
Yep.
But you also talked about the difficulties in terms of the existing life cycle of the academic, and particularly at the Dean Director level. So given the difficulties and the lags in the system that you've mentioned, what specific plans do you have to support world-class ECRs who are already at the ANU and making a contribution, but are limited in our abilities to perform and learn this research independence because of the lack of access to basic resources and support?
Yes. Well, so I'd be lying if I said I have this one solved, but I have identified it as an issue. It is, I said, long-term should be part of what your school gives you. It's within that resource bit, but we have a transition issue. So I have been discussing with Margaret Harding, that this is an issue we need to think about, and we are thinking through it, how to do it. But I'm afraid I don't have an immediate solution for you, and it comes down to money. Is to support it in a sensible way. I don't want to have a new granting system, right? I think there needs to be a base level of support that your school gives you up front, which is agreed by your school to be the resource you need. And as an ECR, you do not need a postdoc. That's a good way to destroy your career. Okay, if you give, because you're at your most able, and what you need are the resources to underpin that. And that's going to depend very much if you're in earth sciences or if you're in finance. There's different things. So again, I think we need to have, as part of the plans coming out of each school, what is a resource that our ECR should have, and we need to figure out how to finance. I don't have the solution to that yet, but I have identified it as a problem that we need to solve. And obviously, you guys would like to be solved sooner rather than later, because you are here.
Okay, so then what we shift the focus is to career paths for a specific group of people, and we have a question here.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. So my question is about, in the ANU strategic plans, specifically 3 and 4, achieving equity and the collegiality vision, we've set a vision for moving forward in those two things. So my question's in two parts to you, as a completing PhD and a retired assistant professor at the other uni. I'm looking about my career at the ANU because I want to teach here, obviously. So the two questions are, when will there be representation on the senior executive for a Pro-Vice Chancellor Indigenous to implement the Aboriginal education strategy? And as there are comparable positions in other unis. And the second part of it is, when will we see an established career path for Indigenous academic researchers and teachers at ANU, because I can't see anything, and through all the levels, from A to E, so that people like me who are looking for a career path have to, I don't mind competing with mainstream people given my experience, but I'd like to see some identified positions in places like CAPA, but who teach the Indigenous studies subjects, but also in other fields, because we have a lot of Aboriginal people who do PhDs at ANU and then go off to other unis, like Megan Davis, who's a PVC at UNSW, was a law PhD here, and there are so many others.
Yep.
In environment, in science, we have an astronomy master's student, a maths PhD student, like we have people in lots of different fields. Sorry, I'm raving. So that's my two questions, the commitment to a PVC and to a career path.
All right, so the discussion around the PVC position is one that is ongoing, and I'm consulting with a number of people and thinking about when is the right time and how should we do that best. Obviously I have entrusted as that is a major part of what Richard Baker does right now. But I'm still, as I said, I am talking to some of the senior leaders of the university about how and when we should best do that. And I'm not any particular fixed mind. I would say I'm not yet convinced that's the #1 priority for us to fix, but I do understand that in the long term it's going to probably be an important aspect of what we do. Getting into the second question, so that is something I think we have made at least a little bit of work on. So what have we done? We are reframing how we support our PhD students and providing, we're doing a pilot work at providing different forms of support for especially more for people who are typically not the traditional PhD path, people coming in later in career, so that we can provide a support that makes sense for people in their lives. I'm afraid a normal APA scholarship isn't so good, probably doesn't meet your needs would be my guess, based on your part of your career. And so we're putting that in. We have started and just advertised for a postdoctoral fellowship, which will be done at least one, and we may well go to more every year. So there will be someone, at least one person, and I'm happy to increase that every year, so that we will be having someone. There will be at least one position dedicated to Indigenous staff. As a 5-year postdoctoral, that will convert to a tenure, so it's essentially a continuing track position, convert to a tenure position based on satisfactory positions. And so the college is all committed to that, so that gives you a track, and then we need to have, I would say, a program of mentoring and things once, where people are on that, and that is in the middle of developing, but we have committed to making sure that we have, right now, we have gone from 3 Indigenous permanent staff members to 4, but we need to increase, in my opinion, by 1 a year. At least, that's the minimum. And quite frankly, if we're going to get to 80, which is sort of a reasonable target for this university, we're probably going to have to go up to 2 or 3 a year. But I want to create a whole pipeline. So we have a process where I think our undergraduate students are being served pretty well. I would like to increase the numbers, but I think we have the highest completion rate in the sector by a considerable amount, and they seem to be doing very well. But I think we have low completion rates amongst our PhD students. We need to fix that, and we have not had a program beyond that. It's just sort of a cliff. And so we have, referred to essentially saying we're going to have this career structure that goes on. And so that has started. The first interviews are happening for our first 2 candidates in that, I think in this week, or maybe next week. And so you can see that as a regular feature of what's going on, and it doesn't just have to be one. We will increase it because I know I need to, my goal is to make sure we have on order of 80 staff members here permanent. And so that sort of tells you need 2 or 3 people a year at least. So that's how we're doing it.
Okay, we are aware of your time constraints, so there are
I have a few minutes. I realized I was late, so and I did go off for a long time in the first bit.
We have a few minutes. Do you want to go to that table? Okay. So there's a question about collaboration across colleges.
Yep.
Hi. So we're all in agreement from our discussion that it's like a really good thing to do to promote interdisciplinary collaborations. But we kind of have a question about whose responsibility it is. So we're of the opinion that if somebody wants to collaborate across the university, they probably will already. So whose responsibility is it to increase the amount? And that comes from the basis of people meeting barriers to collaboration, previously mentioned over here. And also, should there be somebody in the school where you can see who's open to collaboration, like maybe a register per school or so on? So whose responsibility is it to initiate and to promote the collaboration across universities?
All right, so ultimately it is the executive's job and the dean's job at some level to make this happen. My own experience is what I would describe as arranged collaboration doesn't work very well. You need to facilitate it. So how are we facilitating it? One, we're trying to arrange a series of activities which bring people from across the campus together, so you just have the opportunity to talk to each other. I try not to be too specific on that. But you need to have the opportunity to meet them. We need to provide platforms and medias which are woefully underdeveloped right now to do that as well. We need to incentivize it, so collegiality, now part of the promotion criteria, going to be part of hiring criteria as well. You know, the lone person who closes the door, that's just not the future of what we want this university to be. And then we need to also incentivize it with funds. And so, as I said, the global change initiatives are really meant to be a bottom-up approach to you guys figure out how you want to do it, and there are millions of dollars on the table to do so. All right? And so there are already some initiatives going across the university. For example, there's one on indigenous health and well-being, which is being developed involving, I think, 5 colleges right now. That's percolating along. But then I've seen everything from geoengineering to the ethics of genomics and things beginning to happen. Those are going to happen, and you guys are the group that are really going to make those things run, because you're agile in how you think of things. So I think that that'll be an ongoing facilitation. We're going to see how it goes. I want to empower people. I would like to put more and more money into that type of thing, because I think that's what's going to be the really exciting things where we can revolutionize how things are done outside the university. So that's the basic approach. I could put someone in each school in charge of collaboration. It's just not going to work, in my opinion. But if people very strongly think that's the right idea, I'm happy to give things a go. My sense is that's not the way to do it. So rather provide lots of events. Hopefully today is an event for you guys as well. But then, as I said, some serious money on the table to look at new things. And we won't be able to fund all those events, but we're looking at those series of ideas as a way to provide partial funding, big funding, philanthropic bits, all sorts of ways, helping you write the right grant if that fits in there. So hopefully we'll be able to get a lot of things there. And you may find that sometimes when you're at your age, the best thing you have, quite frankly, is your time and energy. And remember that I had $8,000 worth of funding for the work that won the Nobel Prize. So you have the ability, you are your most valuable asset, right? Because you are something you cannot go out and buy for $100,000, right? And so do not underestimate your ability as an ECR, especially if you have some flexibility, which I'm hoping to provide you guys in the new frameworks going forward, to just go out and do it. And you don't need, you should not be waiting for permission. Because if you wait for permission, you almost certainly will not be given permission to do something really, really interesting. Because by definition, it's outside the sphere of thought. So.
Okay, so we're very pleased to see the commitment in the strategic plan to value and collegiality, enabling it, rewarding it, celebrating it. But we'd like to hear you speak a little bit about, firstly, how you define collegiality, and then how you would see it being measured, being assessed and rewarded, and how you think that Nectar and early career researchers in general can help promote collegiality, particularly given the constraints or the situation that we often find ourselves in with power differentials and hierarchies. What can we do?
All right, so collegiality is a cultural thing, and we can incentivize collegiality. I've just told you some of the ways to set that up. But there's also a matter of removing barriers. So let's talk about some of the barriers around collegiality. The infamous, what we call EFSL leakage across the university, where if you, by God, do something horrible like teach a class with another part of the university, it's not clear. You might actually lose student revenue, and so your head of school is going to be, I don't like that. And this probably doesn't come down to your level, but it very much defines the thinking of schools, because we've had quite a punitive system in place. So we need to figure that out, and last year, my biggest failure is, from my own assessment, is failure to get much traction on thinking about how we allocate resources in this university, which do not create barriers for collegiality. And I have not solved it, but we need to do that. In terms of defining collegiality, I can define collegiality, but I'm not keen to go out and measure it and then judge you on it directly for obvious reasons, is that it'll end up creating, I think, some perverse outcomes. But to me, what's collegiality? Collegiality means you are valued in a whole variety of ways, which I don't want to specify because I don't think I can in advance, by your colleagues at the university, by your students. And my personal thinking about how we talk about this, and Marnie can talk about it more, but for example, you're going to level D, which I realize not maybe on everyone's agenda here. You have to put a statement on why do you think you're collegial, and and so express it in your own words of why you think you add value to the whole of the university. And then the panel's going to look at that and say, oh yeah, right. Hi, I'm Donald Trump, and I'm collegial because people trust me and they see me as a source of truth. Okay, thank you, Donald. That didn't seem to pass the sniff test by the promotion panel, right? You see what I mean? So when people are manifestly making it up, it kind of shines through. Now, the reality is most of this university are not perverse. They will say, oh, wow, maybe I need to work a little bit on being a little more collegial rather than something else. And so my hope is that it'll actually just change behavior. I mean, I don't want to punish people. I want to incentivize people, just think a little bit about outside, how am I contributing? And it's it could be everything to so-and-so, I had to take 2 weeks of sick leave, and I went and taught their class and took a big load of their mind out. I mean, I think most of you would think I'd be prepared to do that, right? And that's a good thing. You could put that in, these are the types of things I do. Again, I don't want to be too specific because then you just create, people then will do those 4 things that you say are collegial, and collegiality is much bigger than that. So there's this problem of setting expectations and measurement, and as best you can, you want to have the measurement be completely disconnected to the specific expectations, so that you measure the effect of doing this, but you don't actually create very specific types of behavior, except for where you really want specific behaviors. But if I can be honest, collegiality is infectious, and when you look at things like the voice survey, which I hope you all fill out, so we had a very large fraction of people fill out, but I actually use that to look at the sick parts of the university, because they stand out. And when you're having problems around collegiality, they show up as a big red dot on that thing. And that allows me to go in and say, okay, what's going on here? And normally, it's because there's some problem staff members. And you'd be surprised how much bad culture is created by a few number of individuals. And we just need to weed those things out and work on it.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. Can we please all thank Professor Brian Schmidt for the time
And it's great to be able to chat to you, and feel free to continue to post questions. I spent a long time thinking exactly on the letter that was written on career structure. Margaret gave a brief one, and I'm sorry it's taken so long, but I have been thinking about it for 3 months. So it's permeated my brain, so don't think that you've been ignored.
So latest work.
well thought out letters, like that one, work very well.
Okay.
They get my attention and I think about them.
Okay. Thank you.